stay here for Bolaji's session. Please stay here as I invite Bolaji onto the stage. Please clap for Bolaji
The
now.
other session. Okay. Now, oh, me? I saw like 5 million people earlier. Now I can see just 10 people. I didn't realize you people hate me so much. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you. So this is supposed to be a workshop, and it's kind of an unusual setting for a workshop. Like I can't even see your faces. There's so much light. So, again, I will try as much as I can to keep this interactive. But let's just wait a bit for the screen to come up. My name is Bolaji Ayodeji, and I'm a software engineer. And today we will be going through the workshop building e-commerce solutions with Commerce Layer Nextjs demo store. I want to believe everyone who is here already checked the schedule description. Is that correct? Like, do you know the workshop you're here for? Are you sure? Can I ask someone? It's funny to do that because I can't even see your faces. You're all looking red and white. Okay, I think that white light makes it better. Thank you. Okay, cool, we have that now. Cool. So just a quick question. How many of us here have experience with building anything e-commerce related? Anybody? Just so I understand what the experience level is here. Nobody? Okay, one person, two persons, three persons. Okay, cool. Nice. All right. So basically today we'll try to look at how to build composable e-commerce infrastructures, and I'll try to introduce you to the entire process. It's supposed to be a hands-on workshop, but I see we are all seated and our legs crossed, no laptops. So I'm not so sure how this is going to work, but if you have your laptop, okay, cool. If you have your laptop, you can bring it out. We're supposed to get dirty in 50 minutes. I mean, it's going to be like fast, speed coding. Probably we might win a Guinness record for that. All right. So basically, we would run through the overview, prerequisites of this workshop, and every other thing we'll discuss in, I think we have like less than 40 minutes, right? And I expect that at the end of this workshop, you should all be able to understand what composable commerce means and basically how e-commerce infrastructures work. I mean, you should pretty much understand how platforms like Amazon, how they build their infrastructure and what goes on when you click to buy something to when you eventually get the order. So I expect you all have your laptops, you have a working ID, you've done all these things. Can you see this very clearly? Can you? I think I should switch to a light. Perfect. Okay, I think this is much better. All right. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, we'll be taking a look at how e-commerce infrastructures work. And just to get us started, I would like to define some terms and help us understand what we'll be talking about throughout the entire workshop. So who has said about the term composable before? Composable? Nobody. Who has said about monolith? Okay, a few people. Okay, nice. Right, so if you know what a monolith looks like, it looks like something like this, where you have the front-end layer and the back-end infrastructure coupled together in one system. That's happened for like several years, and then several issues arose from this process, from the developer experience to the customer experience over time. And then we eventually had something like this, which we usually call headless, which basically decouples the front end from the back end layer. And then there is the API layer, which is the intermediary between both of that. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, with working with CMSs and the rest of that. So that's pretty much the headless approach. And then we have composable. And what composable microservices do now is that you decouple the logic in the entire app. You have the front-end layer, and you have different microservices. For example, you have the commerce microservice, which handles everything e-commerce. You have contents, and then you have search. Same can happen for some other different microservices. And then each of these microservices is communicated to the front-end layer, and that's pretty much how composable work. The idea is you are composing different tools together to develop what you're trying to do, right? And in e-commerce, this is what it looks like. So many of what we'll talk about today, it's more of like high-level business scale e-commerce engineering, which is why I think you're all fortunate to be here this morning, because this is like real stuff, if that makes sense, right? So I would explain how this works from a business perspective and how developers get to implement something like this. And at the end of the day, you would see how the commerce part works, which is like our main focus for today, and how you can also use the other sections you have. Because the goal here is you're trying to build a solution where every person in your team works on an independent part of the application. So for example, the commerce microservice handles everything related to the commerce logic. Transactions, payments, SKUs, and everything around that. And then contents people focus on just content, product descriptions, images, and all those stuff. Why those handling search focus more on personalization, when you want to see particular products that align with your interests and all that stuff. So that's pretty much how it works. I think I've explained how this whole thing works. And then today I would show you how you can achieve something like this with Commerce Layer. So let's just get started with the workshop lessons. I can see like 5 laptops, which is cool. So I don't know if you can access this repository on your end, right? You can you? Or you, okay, you need the link. So I mean, it's just github.com/Bolaji Ayodeji, then put that repo there. So you can access that. Is that cool? Okay. So we'll do like a quick 5 to 10 minutes intro to, we call them like data models of e-commerce. Basically, I want to try and show you how everything works from start to beginning. So basically, you have a merchant. I'm sure you might pretty much understand how that works. So when it comes to products in e-commerce, we have something we call SKUs, which is like stock keeping units. And basically, SKUs are like individual identifiers of different variants to be sold. Now, this is what I mean. If I want to sell this shirt, it's a product, a shirt. But there's a blue shirt and there's a red shirt. Those are 2 different items, right? So if I wouldn't say the blue shirt is the same thing with the red shirt. But the SKU identifies each individual variant of a product. Does that make sense? That's why if you observe, if you're trying to buy a t-shirt, you see like XLL behind some URLs, and then you see large, and you see SM. Is that making sense? So basically, each of those individual units represents the SKUs. And that's pretty much the fundamental building block of the product itself. And yeah, so sometimes you see stuff like this. This is what like an SKU code looks like. There are different standards for it, but most people try to do, you put the code of the product, and then you put the variant description. So if it's differentiated by size, you can do like XX, XL for extra large, XX, XS for extra small, that kind of stuff. If it's related to color, you can do anything you want, basically. And that's pretty much it. And then we have other stuffs like SKU options, which basically, you can try to personalize certain SKUs. So for example, when you want to buy a shirt, you want to put your name on it. When you want to buy something, you want to add something extra before you purchase it. So SKU options allows you to, now, these things we're talking about is like the technical points, right? Is it making sense? So I'm trying to show you what works underneath, for example, when you try to buy stuff on Amazon. This is the entire thing running behind. Each product have SKUs. There are also SKU options when you want to try to add some emojis to your Apple AirPods when you buy from Apple. And then we also have something we call SKU lists. And basically it means that you can group many SKUs in a list and assess them in several ways. You can do different stuff like apply promotions to them and all of that stuff. This is also one thing that people use when they try to build that part of your e-commerce store. And then we also have bundles. I'm sure we all know bundles, right? Have you tried to buy something from Amazon and they tell you it's frequently bought with this? So it's like a bundle of 3 different products together. Yeah, so this is like kind of how that one works. And then we also have stock locations, right? So basically you need to know if a particular product is available before you can sell it. Makes sense, right? Now, again, just so I can say it, these things we're talking about are actual business logic that is physical, most of them. But this is how it's being implemented from a technical standpoint, if that makes sense, right? So if I'm trying to buy a t-shirt, the black variant of it, I need to know how much more of that t-shirt is available in a stock location. Now, that stock location is also based on who is buying. So we have markets. We all know what markets are, right? So a market is not necessarily defined by the geographical location, right? It might be defined based on how you are going to ship that item. What that means is that I can group Nigeria and Ghana as one market, or maybe Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and call it like the African market or something. It's not in the same geographical region, but I can call that one market. And what that means is that I'm shipping products to those 3 countries from one stock location. Is it making sense? You can have multiple stock locations. It's based on however you define your inventory. And that's what we call inventory management, right? And then we also have what we call inventory models. There are different models and how you manage your stock, how people, you're familiar with returns. You buy a product to return it. Now, is it making sense how you see that those things work with the stock location? Because I can't just return an item anyhow. It needs to go back to the stock location that is closest to me or within that market region. And that's pretty much how all of these things work. So there are different strategies like, split shipments. Have you bought something, you bought 2 items the same time, they didn't arrive the same time. They came in 2 different shipments. Familiar, right? So that's pretty much what's happening, split shipments. You can ship from the primary stock location. If you have 2 of the items in this stock location and the person wants to buy 5, you can't deliver 5 to them. So you split the shipment, 2 from here, 2 from here, that kind of stuff. That's how all of these things work behind the scene. And then we have stock items. This is basically what tracks the number of items that are available to be sold. Now, picture this again. You have the SKU, which is like the single identifiable unit of that variant of item. You have the stock location. The SKU is more like a technical thing. It's not physical. It's like a label. Then the stock item tells you how much of that SKU is available in the stock location. Making sense, right? And then we have price lists. I'll try to be very fast with prices. We have price lists, you have currencies. Now, we are talking about something different from the traditional way of selling where it's just, one sales, Naira, for example. The example I gave about like selling in Nigeria, Ghana, Rwanda, those are 3 different currencies, if that makes sense. So Kenya uses Kenyan shillings. I don't know what Rwanda uses. Nigeria uses Naira. So you can have prices for one SKU in different currencies. Is that making sense? So what I'm selling for 10,000 Naira in Nigerian Naira is being sold for 20,000 Kenyan shillings for the same SKU. Now you see the reason why this is already becoming a nice way to structure e-commerce. So this is how modern scale businesses structure everything. Imagine you have a system where it's like just one product, one price, and then you're trying to convert the price at the end of the day. Exchange rate differs, so there's a lot of issues with that process, and it doesn't work well for international markets. If you're selling for just one market, maybe just in Lagos, it works to just use only Naira, if that makes sense, right? So you can set different prices for one SKU, different currencies. And then, you can also do stuff like price tiers and all of that stuff. We already touched points on how markets work, but I'm sure many of us are familiar with different market. You've stopped seeing this for like how long now? Just now? Oh, okay. I think they'll try and fix that, but I'll just continue talking. You're familiar with business models like B2C, B2B, right? Right? You're smiling. Who knows what B2B is? Sorry? I should not be asking you, you would know that. I need someone here. Okay, B2C. C2C. That's cheating. Okay, yeah, so there are those kind of sales. And then you can also do VIP private sales. There are different ways you can structure your stuff. So you will see this workshop is going to be more of like, I take you through how the business stuff works, and then we see how it's being implemented basically. And then we have shipping, shipping categories. If you observe when you try to ship some things, you see like fast, express, and all of those kind of stuff, determines how fast you get the product and also how much you get charged for shipping. And that's also determined based on your location, being that if I'm shipping to someone in Ghana, ideally it's already an increased price compared to someone I'm shipping to in Lagos. So the price is different. If you choose express, it's also different. So shipments and shipping category, handle all of those things based on the stock location also. And then we have shipping zones, we have shipping methods. So basically, shipping zones is more like a location in the market itself, right? You can group different locations into one, similar to how I discussed the stock location thing. How many minutes? Just now? No, okay. And let's just keep going while I think they try to sort it. So there are different shipping methods defined by the currency, right? You have shipping category, shipping zone, stock location, and then you have the weight of the item. The weight of the item also can determine which area the product is going to be shipped to, and then it's attached with a cost. And then there's what we call delivery lead times. You've tried to buy an order and then it tells you to arrive in 5 days. Have you seen that before? You've seen that before, right? So basically that is calculated based off the stock location, what you are buying, the shipping method you've decided to pick. So if you choose express, if the regular one was 5 days, you might get it in 3 days. So this logic is how all of these things work behind the scenes. Still not showing. Okay. And then we have, you now get to the parcels and the packages. Now you've gotten through purchasing an SKU. You've picked your price, the currency, the shipping method, and then there are like parcels. I mean, it's not the physical parcel itself, but that same physical parcel has to pass through technical logic before it can be shipped at the end of the day. And then it ends up in like DHL, for example, and then they bring it to you, if that makes sense, right? So that's pretty much everything. Then we have payments. Yeah, we have payments. We have payment gateways. We have payment methods. And then we have stuff like taxes. We're pretty much familiar with payment gateways. Gateways like Paystack, Flutterwave. And then we have methods like pay with your card. Makes sense, right? And then when you're trying to place an order, so I'll just run you through like the anatomy of how an order works generally. So a customer visits a store, you try to purchase something, you select the item you want, and then you add them to cart, right? And then if you want, you can apply a discount or not, and then when you add to cart, that's a draft order, if that makes sense. And why it's a draft order is because the order is not attached to anything, it's not attached to any customer. So when you now, the draft order is going to be labeled as a pending order until you add your email address, if that makes sense. You can purchase something as a guest and all of that. So you need to associate the order with one person. This thing I'm saying doesn't happen like this physically. It's on the technical standpoint that you do all of these things. Already when you just add an order, it just goes straight for the user. But this is what's happening behind the scene, right? And then you enter your shipments and your billing address, you select a payment method, you select your shipping method, the prices are summed up, and then you make your payments, right? So when you make your payment, 3 things happen behind the scene. When you make a payment first, it's authorized, but you need to capture the payment. I don't know if you observe sometimes you pay something, it's not debited from your account yet. So basically, the payment has not been captured yet. Basically, what that means is like your bank communicating to the how do I put it? The person handling the merchants, receiving of that money and then taking that money from your account, transferring it to that end. That process needs to happen. Some people call it a settlement process, but basically your order is authorized, or rather your payment. And then after the payment is authorized, it will be captured. So you can cancel your order before it is captured. If you observe, sometimes you place an order, they tell you can cancel within 3 days or something. Depends on how they structure the logic. So you can cancel before it's captured. Nothing will be debited from your account, if that makes sense. And then when it's captured, it now becomes approved. Until the order is approved before it can go through delivery and the rest of the stuff. That's pretty much a crash course on how e-commerce works behind the scenes. There are more stuff to talk about, like promotions, how gift cards work, and all of that stuff. You can already begin to picture how it works with the prices thing I explained. When I put a code, there's already a price attached to an SKU. You decrement a value from it. It reduces the total price and all of that stuff. That's basically how it's working. So now that we have an idea of the anatomy of how this works, the next thing will be for us to explore what it looks like in an actual environment with, an actual store with a front end and all of that stuff, and seeing how micro-frontends and everything can power a modern infrastructure for e-commerce. Now, basically, what we are going to be doing is we're going to be using the Nextjs demo store project. It's open source. It's something that you can use to build an e-commerce store where each part of the logic is handled independently. So I will explain how that works later on. But the carts you see, it's a different app. Checkout is a different app. And then you have the UI. And then you have your content. For this demo, we basically store the content as a JSON file. But I mean, in an actual production-ready platform, you might want to use like a proper content management system for your content editors to like edit the product details and everything directly. So basically, demo store comes with all the contents in JSON file, full catalog management, taxonomies, taxons. So have you observed when you try to check a store, you see all male, all female, you see category gender, category size, category color. There are different categories and stuff, right? And sometimes they even do this category based on location. So like taxons and taxonomies are like it's like the structure of the product itself before you get to the actual variants, if that makes sense. Of course, you can search and like go directly, but this is pretty much how you would start. And then there is like built-in search, and then there's multi-language. Now, we've talked about selling internationally in the intro, Rwanda, Kenya stuff. You also do not just want to give them different prices, but also different, language and all of that stuff. So you can also set all of that thing up. And this is where composable commerce comes in, right? Because the idea now is that e-commerce, your commerce logic is separated from everything. For example, the tool would use Commerce Layer allows you to handle all the transactional functionalities of your e-commerce. So everything, prices, SKUs, all the things we discussed, promotions, everything, handled separately. You set up all those things, you set them up, and then you can now use an API to consume those things and then put them into your brilliant UI. And then that way, your content editors can also create like different content. We call them content locales. So you can have English, French, and that stuff. And then based on the markets you want to sell to, you pair that market to the language. Is it making sense? You observe, you see some stores, you see something like, usually the format is like FR. Okay, let me use French, for example. FR/FR. No. The country code is FR. And then the language is like FR. So the slug is going to be like country language. So if I want to switch to English on the French market, it's going to be like FR/ENUS. That's pretty much how the logic would be changing based on the markets. Usually, it's kind of like a good practice not to suggest a language directly for people, because I might be in Ghana. No, I don't. Does Ghana have an official language that's not English? Sorry. My current affairs teacher would not be happy with me right now. Does anyone know? Is there an official language in Ghana? What? Swahili? Sorry, there is none. Really? Twi, yes. Thank you, Twi. So there is Twi, right? So I might be in Ghana, I don't speak Twi, so you don't want to just suggest a language to me based on where I stay. So you give your users the opportunity to select. You can suggest, being that we see that you're in this location, does this look like where you are? I would decide and then go there. Or you give them the option. So we'll see how that works. And for example, this is what that looks like in a store running locally. Try to speed this up. So you see the slug thing I was talking about earlier? It's very small. Let me try and... Okay, it's bigger now. Yeah, so you see the category based on the region, and then you see each of the countries. For example, if I choose Nigeria, then it's going to use English. If I choose France, it's use French and all of that stuff. So that's with that. We have like very short time, so I would try to speed up on how all of this would work, right? So basically, I don't know who and who is like joining me to do this hands-on, but I mean, this is available publicly. You can try to do it on your own at your own pace. But if you want to follow through, I'll just run through how all of this would work. So basically, first things first, you sign up at Commerce Layer, create an account, and then you create some applications, and then you get some credentials, normal how you work with APIs. Sorry, how many of us work with APIs here? How many of us have never worked with an API before? Don't be shy. Okay, nice, cool. So, but do you know what an API is? You do. Okay, makes sense then. So, there are 2 onboarding guides that would help you set some of these things up. I'm sure most of you are not using your laptop, so I can skip that. And then, you set that up, and then you're ready to go. Basically, we have API credentials. Quite a lot of technical details is going into this, but there are different kind of tokens you use to access different type of resources based on what you are doing. So basically, we have 3 application types: sales channel, integration, and web app. So the usual website where you purchase is like a sales channel. So basically, that's what you need here. You're just trying to get your commerce data and then putting it on the web for someone to make a purchase. And then we have different grant types that you use to get a token. I'm just going to try and make it as simple as possible. There's a client's credentials, password, authorization code, and refresh token. Don't worry about so much of the details. Basically, client's credentials means that you're using the API credentials you got from Commerce Layer to access and get a token. Why password means that you're trying to associate a customer to an order, for example, if that makes sense. So if I'm purchasing a product as a guest, you don't need to do that, or when it comes up back, right? So basically, what that means is that you observe you can have stuff like wish lists, where I can see like my products. Also in the account area, you can see your history of products. For you to do all this kind of logic, you need to associate it with the customer. If you're just doing stuff like buy, sell, deliver, you don't really need all of that. The client credentials is sufficient, which is what we'll be using today. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you are with me, you can go to dashboard.commercelayer.io, sign up, follow the onboarding tutorial. So basically, this is how the demo store works. There are 2 repositories. There's a demo store core, and then there's a demo store. How many of us know what submodules are? Git submodules. Git submodules. You know what Git submodule is? Yeah, nice. So basically, it's like a repository in another repository. It's just linked. It's not really like it's there, but it's linked. And it allows you to like reuse, okay, cool. It allows you to reuse some kind of parent repositories where you need them. Right, so what we did here now is we try to have like a core, and then we make that accessible as a template on GitHub. So when you're trying to work with the demo store, you have 2 ways. You can actually use the core repository itself and do your stuff. But what that means is that you will diverge a bit from the original source, being that you cannot really update when we make new changes and all of that stuff, which is fine if you know what you're doing. But if you go to the demo store route, you can set things up. If there's a change, you can run this command here. Let me try and zoom up a bit. I think my face is covering the main stuff. Okay. You can run git submodule update remote to like get the changes from the parent repository. So again, you are not all doing this hands-on with me. So all you have to do is, for example, you go here. So if you come to the demo store, you would see this, use this template stuff here, and then you create a new repository to like clone everything for you, and then when you do that, you have a fork of that repository like you would see in the demo we are going to be working with today. You see it's a fork. You'd see this generated from, basically because it's like you're using the GitHub module itself. And then, you install it, you run all these commands. Again, you're all not doing this with me, so it's going to be difficult for me to tell you, okay, do this and do that. And it will take quite some time for me to do it for you to see. But basically, I have all of that all set up here. And then the main important thing now would be that you pass in your client ID and the sales channel endpoint. We know what a sales channel is already, right? Okay, so when you sign into, no, that's the wrong one. Dashboard. I hope my internet is working fine. Okay. Just going to check forever. Okay, so basically when you create your account, you have like an environment like this. You can create different organizations. You can have different people who have access to that organization. And then, in the applications tab, you create an application. So for the case we are doing here, like I mentioned, we have sales channel, web app integration, right? So you use the sales channel integration here. And then when you go to that tab, you get like your client ID based endpoints, like basic API credentials kind of stuff for those who are used to working with APIs, right? And for those who are not, this is pretty much how you work with APIs. They give you like a token or something, and then you use it to access something from the platform. And then when you get that, you pass that into the repository you've cloned. There's this env file here where you put those information. As you can see mine here. Don't worry, these are all demo stuff, so you can look at it, it's fine. And then when you're done with that, remember I mentioned the fact that your commerce logic is being handled by Commerce Layer, for example, which means that everything you see on your store, for example, let me show you this. Everything you see on your store starts from you setting all the products itself. For example, you need to, set up all the SKUs. This is what I was talking about when I mentioned SKUs. This is one SKU, and then you see the code, reference, and a bunch of other stuff like weight and all of that thing. And then, you have to set up a SKU list, prices. You need to set up a proper inventory for you to be able to sell. So you need to do all of these things normally when you want to work with composable infrastructures. But in the case where you are trying to do a demo like this, we have ways for you to like seed the organization with some test data that would enable you to like just test things, right? So if you are doing this with me, there is like a command here you can run. It's just going to seed everything and then you do all of that stuff. Perfect. And the beautiful part of this is that when it comes to the store, so let me show you the store and how it works. Basically, you have like the product, and then you can change the country based on the location. For example, let me use France. And then you would observe the slug also changes, and then there are some taxons here. There is the cart, which is a separate app itself. It's using what we call the hosted cards, and then there's the hosted checkout. You see how all of that works shortly. So basically, for you to update what you see, we have 3 files. There is the data JSON file, which includes everything related to the content, right? And then there is the locales, which includes everything related to the language and the translations. And then there is config, where you try to make some minor changes. So let me show you what it looks like. So here you have JSON. You see all like I said, this is not what you would do in an ideal setting. This is like just the raw data and how we try to ensure that the Next.js project runs well. And then you have like countries. You can see here, you observe we have the name of the country, and then we have a market code. You get this market code from Commerce Layers and because you've created all those markets before. Now, remember what I said, a market is not usually tied to a geographical location, meaning that I can create one market for the United States, for Australia, for Canada. It's going to use one market code, but even though it's like different countries. So a market is not really a country by states. You define what a market is based on the locations you would be selling to. And then, you set the languages that are applicable to each of those countries. And then you have like languages. We only have 3 languages on this project: English, Italian, and French. And then you can set up some minor things like the name, favicon, colors. And then you can also create some pages. And then there is the product. Now, this product is the content. We always maintain the fact that content is not commerce. And this is the problem with the monoliths, because you try to put everything together where you are able to edit the content and then still use the same thing on the UI aspect. So what I'm saying now is that what you see here is not the same thing about everything that happens on the commerce logic is the transactional functionalities, which means you create an SKU, you create all that stuff. The content people would write the product description somewhere, and you link them up with the SKU. What that means is that when I'm making an API request to fetch this particular SKU, the API returns the products, the prices, all those stuff. And then you fetch data from your content to request for content for that SKU. So if the SKU match, obviously you will use the same content. Is that making sense? So basically all this content here is like a simulation of what that would look like from the content perspective. And then you have like the images, the slug, and all of that stuff. Everything necessary for Next.js to work fine. And then same thing for taxonomies, for taxons, and all of that. Why for locales, it's pretty much the same thing. You assign different, you put the name of the, what's it called? The name of the items you want to put this. Let me use the one that's not English so it makes more sense. For example, you see here it's like a view all, and the same view all in English, but like the language is different here now. And how it's working now is that the entire application is using each of those JSON files. So when I switch, it picks the language I want and then renders it. And that's pretty much everything around language. So if you want to add more languages, all you have to do is like do this same thing. For example, you want to add TWI. Maybe you put like a tw.json file, replicate this, put the translations, and then in the countries, I think here, yeah, you can add like CW here, which basically is going to reference that language file for this country, if that makes sense. And that's pretty much how all of this organization work. I don't know how much more time I have, but that's everything with the locales. And when you're done with all of that, you would have this working fine. It's a Next.js project. I believe when you all try to do this on your own, you would see how to set these things up. The repo is available for you to explore. Once you do all of this, you just run npm run dev, and then you have something like this. As you can see, you see the product name, you see the price. So let me show you something now. What country did I select? France. Okay, let's do Italian, Italy. I think my computer just shut down, but that's fine. So how many more minutes do I have? So we're going to do the remaining one freestyle, if that's fine. How many? Okay, that's fine. So basically, I wanted to show you when you select a different language and you see the text change and everything around how that part works. So basically, you have all the products on the homepage. 10 more minutes. Okay, thank you. So basically, you have all the products. You select a particular SKU. I would have showed you how you select different variants, because we have a part where you see different colors of a shirt, for example. You select that, and then you would observe that the slug would change because you're selecting a new variant. I've explained how those things work already. And then you're picking a different item, even though it's the same product, right? And then when you're done, you add to cart, and then from add to cart, you check out. So the whole point of this entire stuff now is that you're building a composable infrastructure where the UI is separate from everything. And if you observe, we've not talked about anything back end here, servers and doing all of that stuff. You're not doing all of that here. We're just showing you the front end part now. For everything related to the transactions and all those functionalities, you set them up on Commerce Layer, and then you use the APIs to access that data. if that's making sense. At the end of the day, on the UI aspect, you just consume this data, products, do this, do that, and then you get a functional e-commerce store, if that's making sense. And the benefits of this being is that, one, you are able to get a better developer experience and a better customer experience. And I'll explain what that means. So in the monoliths, like I mentioned earlier, you have everything coupled together in like one system. And you have like different teams working on the same code base, everyone making changes to all the same code base. You are deploying that same app for everybody. So if I make one change to one part of the app, I have to deploy everything again and all of that stuff. And then sometimes there's also like ID overload because it's like large code base for stuff that I don't need to do my own job, if that makes sense, right? So having a composable architecture means that you're making your developers happy in the first place. Those working on the front end part. In fact, some teams go as far as doing what we call micro-frontends. Do we know what micro-frontends are here? But we know microservices. So it's more like microservices for front end. Same way you have different microservices for different parts of the application, you also extend that to the front end. So for example, you have a search microservice, product microservice. Let me just use that too. You can also have a search micro front end. And it means that you extract the logic of search into one independent application and then you connect all together similar to how the microservice would work. Is that making sense? I'm sure you've heard people say, I work on the search team at Microsoft, or I work at this product team at this. They're working on different apps. That's pretty much how it works. So at the end of the day now, your developers can all work on independent teams, and then contents people can do their job brilliantly well without interrupting the technical stuff going on. So you don't have something like for example, WordPress, where you have the products, the content, everything in one environment, meaning that content editors can now be more creative, do their stuff, create all the products without interacting with the code. And at the end of the day, everything comes together from the API aspect, and then you connect all of them together. Now, from the customer part, if you observe, some of the downsides I mentioned now for the developers also apply to customers, in the sense that when you're having ID overloads, for example, and then you still have to deploy that same application, when you're making changes and doing all that stuff, it's still going to affect what you're deploying. So if I make one change to the entire application, I have to redeploy everything. Is it making sense? Is it making sense? How many of us here have businesses, e-commerce business where you sell stuff? So I'm sure I'm speaking to business people who have an understanding of what it means for you to sell, and then every second counts, being that you find large businesses when they try to sell, they tell you that people they have what do they call them, abandoned carts, where you add 5 products in the cart, but they don't buy the product. Do you understand that part? Those business terms where you see that people are not buying the products, right? Each second counts, and then it matters. And at the end of the day, you realize that that value of that sale is from one slight glitch. That's just a 1 second thing, and then it stops customers from purchasing. So the point is, we kind of get into the whole technical thing, and we forget that you're building for customers. It has everything to do about them first before your tech. So at the end of the day, you can build the most luxurious logic, but you lose some customers. And the entire aim of your e-commerce store is to satisfy your customers, to make sales, to make money. That's the goal, right? Are you selling for some other reason? So every amount counts, right? So when businesses say they want to scale, you observe that they're having issues with that existing architecture because it's affecting the sales part of everything. And that's why you now try to do stuff with composable, being that not everybody needs to do this, because you can imagine what we've discussed, a lot of work, a lot of setting up SKUs, doing all that stuff. So if you're selling T-shirts to people in Lagos, you have 100 customers averagely per month. You don't need to do all of these things. A monolith will work fine for you, being that you can still scale with that. When you begin to sell for many people, you have issues with traffic and all that stuff, different locations, you want to sell for more markets. You wouldn't want to try doing stuff with WordPress at the end of the day, because at that point, every amount counts. Now, doing this means that you build a perfect logic that you can now scale with your developer team, and your customers can now have much more, a better experience. It's kind of a myth when people, if you're familiar with e-commerce businesses, they say that they try not to change anything in the checkouts. because they know that that's where like the main value is, the money. So checkout is usually bland for many e-commerce platforms because they're just trying to be very, very careful. And that's also because like there's no flexibility to do anything. Any slight thing would break the entire application. And once it breaks, like I mean, you lose your money there. Doing stuff like this now means that everything is independent. You can easily be flexible to like, I wish this was also, I show you how the checkout works and how flexible you can go with that. You can now do anything you want, be more creative, more flexibility, and then the checkout experience can work fine, can be deployed fine, separate from how cart, for example, works. For example, in this demo we have, the cart works by using the order ID. What that means now is that when you create an order, you have an order ID. In that order, you can have multiple SKUs. I'm sure we already, I mean, by now you can add Amazon, engineer to your resume after this workshop because you can now see how, this is pretty much how it works behind the scene, right? Amazon has built all the entire infrastructure for all these things we've talked about. And at Commerce Layer, we've built that also, and then we are offering it to you as an API, meaning that you can do the same thing Amazon is doing on a different scale, right? And then, you get the order ID with all the SKUs. So when you go to the cart application, all that you need is just that order ID. You can see how beautiful it is because now I don't have to worry about anything. It's just a dynamic app. You pass the order ID, you fetch the resources, you see the cards. When you click checkout, it opens a different app that takes the order ID and then renders like the form with the billing address and all those stuff. You fill the details, you send that data to the API, attach it to the order ID, and then you see your order is like, your payment is first authorized, and then captured, and then approved. Everything with just the order ID. And that's pretty much how the entire composable architecture works. So if you're a small business, it's something you can play around as developers because the ecosystem is changing and growing. So people want to hire more people with like this kind of experience. There's just few people hiring WordPress engineers to build e-commerce store for them. I don't think Nike, for example, would hire you to build something like that for them. And all brands now are, I keep looking back thinking you can see, but yeah, all brands now are building more composable architectures, using headless to scale their businesses because it's growing. That's the point. So your skills would probably work fine for small scale businesses, right? So it's like a personal advice for you to check out stuff like this and try to learn more about them. It's not conventional. It's not what you find many businesses doing, but as you keep, I forgot to ask this question. I don't know the category of engineers I have here. Front end, back end, right? What do you do? Sorry? Full stack. Okay, we have some bosses here. Decide to do both. And then you have different angles to that. So people like this now want to you want to have this kind of skills, and it's not just for front end, for the back end guys, even other areas, because now you observe that the process for this is quite different because it's like a lot of independent applications, splitting stuff, layering, connecting things together. That's the idea of composing. You pick different things together and compose them together. I'm sure you're familiar with stuff like Auth0, Okta, for authentication. All those things are all independent apps. And the beauty now is that brands can select what works best for them and implement it, compared to when you've implemented your own authentication stuff. Tomorrow you want to change something. It's very, very difficult, right? I could be using Auth0 today and easily decide to switch and migrate and do what works best for my product. And another beautiful part being that each of those independent composable tools are secured. So you don't have to handle security yourself I'm done. Okay. You don't have to handle security yourself where you now have to everything, now picture it, front end, back end, you're handling security, production, everything. It's now a complex stuff. And that's why it fails when you're trying to scale for large businesses. But in this case, you focus on the commerce. You pick a different tool to handle this part. It's secured. You wouldn't pick a random tool. That tool employs people to build that stuff. So it's not like they're building trash. They're paying people to build those stuff. So you are sure that this is secured, and then you can pick different tools together and then compose them together. And that's pretty much the idea behind composable commerce. I don't know if all we discussed today made any sense. Did it make sense? Do you think 15 minutes from now you knew less than you know now? Are you sure? So if you go to the other room now and someone interviews you, you can just be, all right. So I don't know if you have questions. You can obviously reach out to me. I don't have my slides, but on the schedule, there's where you can send messages. I would also put all the slides, the repository codes, and everything for you to check out. But is there like maybe one question I can take as I'm walking out? So I would assume the guy who is coming will be slow. So one question as I'm walking out. Anybody? Anybody? So before you leave, anyways, I have some nice stickers and swag for people who are here because you're all special. The others left me. They left me behind. One question. Okay, yeah, while I'm packing. I'll come to you, don't worry. But you can ask. Oh, I said I could come to you and I said you should ask. Okay. Okay.
You mentioned something about micro-frontends.
Yes.
So I'm a backend engineer,
Okay.
and I know with microservices they connect to like API gateways
Yeah.
and stuff. How does micro-frontend connect to get
Same way.
API gateway?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you observe, I explained how the cat thing works, where it just works with just the order ID. It's a separate app. But at the end of the day, the order ID is basically how you're getting the data about the order from the UI itself and then rendering that cat logic. Basically, that order ID is coming from an API, right? So that's where the commerce part comes in, where the cat is like a separate app, the microservice powering the cat is a separate app, and then you can get the data. There has to be something that ties them together. In the case of an order, it's an order ID. In the case of content, is the SKU code, right? So it's the same logic. I don't know if you saw the illustrations that I showed earlier, where you saw search front end, search microservice, and then you connect both of that together. And at the end of the day, so it's a much more technical thing because there are different ways to implement that. If you are using, it depends on the stack and the framework and all that stuff. In like baseline HTML stuff, you can use what do they call these things? Web components and all of that stuff, where you can now begin to decouple different aspects and then have different elements that you can use. So there are different ways to implement the micro frontend itself. That's like a full-blown workshop on its own, if that makes sense. But it's like API layer, basically. All right, thank you. So I have the one question. So I said I have some stuff. I don't know how this will go around, Sha, but can you help me? I don't know how you want to do it, but I need my bag back. Okay, question. I don't know. These guys are not coming, so let's keep going. So they're not. I saw two hands there. I saw one hand there. So let me start with the first hand I saw here. Whose hand was that? Okay, you. Is there a documentation for what I just discussed? Yeah. I'll share. So you have the schedule, right? Once I go back, I'll put everything under that, like the talk, this particular session. You see everything. Question from there. Okay, you're the second. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, as a developer, you want to explore, which means that you can try out these things. Yeah. But on a business standpoint, I would not advise you to do this for like the starting point because like you'll be spending a lot of time doing all of these things for no reason. Like I'm sure you might have realized sometimes people like talk about how microservices are bad. Yeah, there's like every downside to everything. So you need to have a reason to use this above that. So because microservice is like nice, doesn't mean you need to do that. It will still fail for you if you don't have a need. But as a developer, you can explore and try those things just so you know how it works, not really about the business part, if that makes sense. Yes, if you know you are gaining for the business part, you actually want to sell. It's not like, so if you are trying to do that, then you can build a monolith for now. But then if you want to like acquire the skills on your own, you can explore this and see how those infrastructures work. Yeah. Thank you.